Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Forge of Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Alex Ooley, and this is episode 147 of the Forge of Freedom. Today, I'm just going to share a short clip with you. It's actually a message that I presented at church on Father's Day of this year, June 16th, 2024, and it was my first Father's Day as a father. And when I'm introduced, it says that my mother-in-law introduces me and says that I volunteered to speak at church, but that really gives me too much credit. My wife's grandfather is the pastor at the church, and he asked me if I'd be willing to speak at church on Father's Day, and he's really somebody I don't like to say no to. Somebody I respect, and it was really humbling and an honor that he would ask me to speak at church. So I agreed to speak. I didn't volunteer to speak. But when I was thinking about what I would say at church that might be useful or valuable to people who might listen, I really was thinking about, I didn't have much experience as a father, but I say this, I have a great father, a great grandfather, and a great grandfather who's passed, and also my wife's grandparents are great examples to me. So I have a lot of wisdom and experience to draw from their influence on me. And I just hope that I can utilize that wisdom that they've hopefully imparted on me in my role as a father. But I also wanted to talk about other things that I care and think about, and that one of those things is this intersection between philosophy and religion. I studied philosophy as an undergrad. I still think about philosophy and read philosophy from time to time. And one thing that has become popular in recent years is this notion that comes primarily from Marcus Aurelius, but it's present in other places as well, and in other the teachings of other great thinkers. But is this idea that the obstacle is the way, and so often we try to avoid hardship, we try to avoid obstacles in our life, when so often what we want, what we truly care about, is just on the other side of that obstacle, and we have to face it. And I tried to incorporate that message into my talk at church, and I thought, this might be something that's actually worthwhile, or that some of the listeners to this podcast might enjoy as well. So I hope you do enjoy it. I hope it provides some value to you. And so with that being said, I'll just go ahead and play that clip for you, and then we'll close up. It's just 10 minutes, so it won't take up, it'd be a quick listen. Won't take up a bunch of your time.
We have some special speakers today. Some of them volunteered and some of them were voluntold. That's my new word. I love it. But we are going to start with Alex Ooley, who so graciously volunteered to go first. Thank you, Alex.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alex Ooley. Most of you probably know me. I know most of you, but for those who don't know me, I am Whitney's husband and Tate's father, and this is my first Father's Day, so it's an exciting time for me. I'm an attorney, for those of you who don't know, so I obviously have to start with a disclaimer. A good friend of mine runs a blog called No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money. And most people see money and guns as useful tools, but also as tools of power and corruption and violence. And The implication, of course, is that lawyers are beneath both of those. So we're starting today with the bottom of the barrel, okay? So I'm sure Dwayne and Caleb and Luke will have some goodness to add to that barrel as well. But I hope you enjoy or get something from the comments that I've prepared. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. It was Sunday, December 24th, 2023, the last time I read these words from Psalm 91 out loud, just moments before I became a father on Christmas Eve nearly 6 months ago. Whitney had been having severe pain in her upper abdomen wrapping around her back, and at 2:30 a.m. that morning, Whitney woke me up because she was in terrible pain. She was reluctant to go to the ER, and I asked her, if a patient came in to see you at the urgent care with your symptoms, what would you do? And we knew the answer. We took our dog, Millie, to my parents' house at about 3:45 a.m. and headed to the hospital. I drove slowly because bumps really caused pain for Whitney, although I would later get a lot of flack for barely driving the speed limit. We went to the ER at Baptist Louisville because the OB office wasn't open, and they very quickly moved us to labor and delivery. They ran some labs, and the doctor delivered the difficult news that Whitney had HELP, a rare but dangerous condition for which the only treatment was delivery. So I made phone calls to our parents and our siblings, and the hospital staff prepared Whitney for delivery. Dwayne and Jamie drove to the hospital quickly and were able to visit a bit before Whitney was taken to the delivery room. Dwayne said a prayer with each of us around Whitney's hospital bed, and right before they wheeled Whitney to delivery, I read all 16 verses of Psalm 91. Dennis Elrod had suggested it to Whitney, and she asked me to read it, including these 2 verses. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call on me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. During delivery, I was behind a curtain, but they said I could watch if I thought I would not pass out. I watched most of the procedure. It was fairly crude and required lots of pulling and levering. It was a bit of a surreal moment when I saw them pull our son from the womb. They momentarily held him to Whitney's face as they pulled down the curtain and then quickly took him to the little operation table. He struggled for a bit because he had inhaled a bunch of fluid. He was okay at first and then began to fade. They took off the mask and continued trying to suck fluid from his lungs. He started to turn blue, and I became very nervous, while trying not to show any concern for Whitney to see. I was glad Whitney could not see their efforts to resuscitate him because it was fairly touch and go, and the demeanor of the delivery team became frantic. Thankfully, Tate came through after a good fight, and I welcomed him to the world. He grabbed my finger at one point while he was still on the operating table, and that's when it felt real. I was also able to hold him close to Whitney for a few moments before he was taken to the NICU. He spent the next 29 days in the NICU, and it wasn't always easy. But our journey is not all that extraordinary or difficult when compared to the struggle that many others have endured. It was a rough start, but we are blessed with a happy and healthy baby boy. That's the Cliff Notes version of Tate's birth story. And as a relatively new father, I don't have much experience to offer the other fathers here in the audience, but I have other great fathers to look up to. My own father, Dwayne, Jeff, my grandfathers, and others, but most of all, our God. Tate's birth story got me thinking about the burden of being a father and the great responsibility that comes with it. Whitney and I saw Jordan Peterson in late May to listen to his talk about his upcoming book, We Who Wrestle with God. He talked about the story of the crucifixion and how it wasn't just death. It was brutal, prolonged, public, humiliating. But he bore the cross. He bore the burden of the public humiliation and the excruciating pain and ultimately the sins of the world. Peterson contrasted this terrible suffering with the wonderful goodness of salvation. It's the sort of balance and harmony that God designed the world to have. There can't be good without the existence of bad. There can't be joy without suffering, and so on. Likewise, God's greatest sacrifice was his greatest gift. And I thought to myself, in many ways, this is the model of fatherhood. We need to bear our own crosses as fathers so that our sons can turn into men by teaching them to bear their own crosses. For those who know me, you know that I like to read philosophy, particularly Stoic philosophy, and there's a phrase from Stoic philosophy that has become popularized in the last few years. It's just this: the obstacle is the way. And for Jesus, the obstacle was the cross and the tomb. And he overcame those obstacles because on the other side of it was eternal salvation, the greatest goodness of all. We have to know when to stand in the face of adversity, know when to carry on and overcome pain, and when to bow down in the presence of the Almighty. As fathers, we need to return God to the center of our families and turn away from false gods, as Chandra said last month, Mother's Day. The center of our family shouldn't be TV or sports. The center of our community shouldn't be courts or schools or sports arenas. Martin Luther will turn over in his grave when I say this in a Protestant church, but I'm going to say it anyway. My maternal grandparents were Catholic, and so I spent a lot of time in the Catholic Church growing up. But one thing I've always liked about the Catholic Church is that the crucifix is front and center in the church. Protestant churches generally display the empty cross to emphasize the resurrection rather than the crucifixion. But I think it's helpful to remember both. Either way, the cross is front and center. When you visit Europe, the church is at the center of nearly every small town. In Florida, there's a town called Ave Maria, designed by the owner of Domino's Pizza, with the church at the middle and the rest of the town sprawling out from its center hub. That sort of reorientation toward God and the cross starts in the home, and it's a reminder that each day we need to bear our own crosses. Bear the cross of fatherhood. And when I say that, I'm reminding myself as much as anyone. These last 5 months have been the proudest months of my life. I sometimes feel powerless, especially when all Tate wants is his mama. But in these moments and on many occasions, my job is to love my wife, knowing that by loving her, it might make it just a little bit easier to summon the strength to be the wonderful mother that she is. In short, our obstacle and our cross to bear as fathers is to make sure that we orient ourselves toward God. Face obstacles. Love our spouses and love our children, so that our children, as Psalm 91 says, dwell in the shelter of the Most High and rest in the shadow of the Almighty. Thank you.
All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that and got something valuable from that discussion. I think the story about the birth of our son was a story, but also an experience that I often referred back to this notion, this idea that the obstacle is the way, and I think that we face obstacles every day in our life. It doesn't have to be something as big or as grand as the birth of a child, but even smaller obstacles. I think that too often we're reluctant to face them, and like I said, what we really want is on the other side of that obstacle. And there are lots of great, I think, parallels not only in the Bible but in other great teachings and experiences that we have. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to help us spread the message of freedom. As always, you can find the show on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, and at X at Forge of Freedom. You can also find the complete show notes and all of the previous episodes at our website, forgeoffreedom.com. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in this week, and I look forward to talking with you again next week. And until then, of course, remember, you are the Forge of Freedom.